Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In Conversation with the Royal Butler. Today I'd like to talk to you about Balmoral Castle, which is one of the private homes owned by the Queen and the late Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. The Queen's actually got two private residences, Sandringham House and of course, as I've mentioned, Balmoral Castle. Balmoral Castle has always been one of the Queen's favourite residences, if not the rest of the royal family, because they've always enjoyed going up there every summer for their summer break. And I was lucky enough, when working for the Prince of Wales and members of the royal family, to travel and to visit Balmoral and the surrounding estate. Now, the castle that we all know and see today is not the castle that stood there a few hundred years ago. There's been a few changes since then, which I'm going to tell you about. But the first thing I'd like to talk to you about is, why do the royal family have the holidays in Scotland? Well, this tradition more or less started with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. A few years after they were married, in 1842, they went for a visit to Scotland, or a tour, a grand tour of Scotland, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, they went back a few other times. And then in 1847, they decided to rent a castle, and this castle in particular was called Edverichy Castle. Now, some of you that remember the TV series Monarch of the Glen might recognise this castle, because this is the Edverichy Castle. And I know it quite well because I used to live near it. I've even had a tour of it quite a few years ago, and absolutely stunning, beautiful place, beautiful gardens as well, and it's just beside a loch. Now, as I mentioned, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert leased this castle in 1847, and the weather didn't really go in the favour because it rained quite a lot, which I suppose can happen in Scotland. We do get good weather as well, I'll quickly add. But on this occasion, apparently it rained, and Queen Victoria was not that impressed. And I believe also that the royal doctor also said that the weather was not great for the health, and they should be looking at the other side of Scotland. But there's also another story that I was told when I actually lived up in that area. And it's quite interesting because the story was that Queen Victoria's son, the Prince Albert, or the later King Edward VII, had an affair with one of the local ladies, or one of the girls. Now, from what I understand, it could even have been a maid of somebody in the local village, but it was enough to kind of make Queen Victoria think this is not a good idea remaining in this area. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea, but there is some information about it online. So I like to believe that could be one of the reasons, but I think we'll stick to the weather. We'll say it was the weather that made them decide to look for another property. And so basically, the Queen and Prince Albert then head about Balmoral Castle. And the following year, they actually went up for a holiday to Balmoral Castle with members of their family. But however, there was a slight problem. They found it rather small. So they decided to add a few extra buildings on, just to make it a bit more accommodating for them. And then they had a few more holidays up there, thoroughly enjoyed that area. They loved the castle, apart from it being slightly small. And then they discovered that it was coming up for sale. So they decided to buy it. And then in 1852, they acquired the property. And then in 1853, they began to redesign a new Balmoral Castle, or they had an architect, I believe his name was William Smith, who came in and designed the Balmoral Castle that we know today. But they didn't, the way they did this, the new castle was built about 100 yards from the old castle, so they could actually still continue to go up there for holidays and watch the new castle being constructed. And then when the new castle was constructed a few years later, they actually demolished the old castle, which I think is quite a shame, because obviously you can have two castles, but I think the old castle was quite pretty. But unfortunately, that's what happened back then. So by 1857, the family moved into their new castle, which was a much better size and could accommodate everybody. And as I mentioned, this is the castle that we all know today. And then obviously the Queen, Queen Victoria, and her family continued to go up there for many, many holidays. But however, sadly, only a few years after the castle's construction, Prince Albert died. And when you visit Balmoral Castle, there's lots of evidence of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's influence. I mean, it's almost a little bit like a time capsule the way it's been done, because inside it hasn't really changed that much since the time of Queen Victoria. I mean, of course, it's been updated and for safety reasons it's been rewired and those kind of things, but the actual structure, the kind of furnishings, a lot of what's inside has been there since the time of Queen Victoria. So it's quite amazing to actually kind of go around it. It really is like walking through history. Absolutely fantastic. Now, luckily, members of the royal family, even after Queen Victoria's death, continued to go to Balmoral. It's always been a very popular holiday destination for the royals. And what I forgot to mention was that when they purchased Balmoral Castle, they also got the Birkhall estate, which is next door. And Birkhall, some of you might recognise the name of, but that was actually the home, later on, became the home of the Queen Mother. In fact, Queen Elizabeth, our Queen, and her husband actually had part of the honeymoon at Birkhall, but later on it became, after the death of George VI, it became one of the homes of the Queen Mother in Scotland, as well as Castle of May. And Birkhall is now owned by the Prince of Wales and the Duchy of Cornwall, and that's where I was normally based when I travelled up to the Balmoral estate. I would normally be based at Birkhall, and then from time to time I would travel over to the castle as and when required, both in work capacity but also in private. And as I said, luckily our members of the royal family enjoy Balmoral as much as their ancestors did. Even the younger royals, Princes William, Harry, and I remember the Duchess of Cambridge as well, when she used to go up there, they all thoroughly enjoyed being in Scotland. So it's quite good, because obviously it secures the future of Balmoral for the next generation, and hopefully the generation after that, so that the royals will continue enjoying these homes that their ancestors lived in. So from my point of view as a youngster, I loved going up to Balmoral Castle. Whenever the Queen was in Scotland, to me that was where you should go to try to see her. And I used to try to convince my parents from time to time to go up there, and especially when the Queen was up there. And even on a few occasions we stayed nearby, which was amazing. And I even remember one of the occasions we actually stayed up there, it actually rained, so we didn't see much at all because it rained the whole time we were there. But on saying that, it was just the excitement of to me, and remember this is when I was a youngster, kind of being close to where the royal family were. It was quite exciting. I should mention that in Scotland you've also got the official residence of the Queen when she's in Scotland, which is Holyrood House, or some people call it Holyrood Palace, and that's the palace of Scottish kings and queens going back centuries. I suppose you could say it's the Buckingham Palace of Scotland, but the Queen, even though it is the official kind of main residence, Balmoral Castle is where you will find the Queen most of the time, because, as I said, it's one of her favourite places. It was Queen Elizabeth who actually, like Queen Victoria, called it her Highland paradise. And you really can see why they call it the Highland Paradise, because it really is quite a magical place. The other thing I remember when I was a child, my parents on a few occasions used to drive us up to Balliter and then on to Balmoral. Balliter is the local town. and then we'd go over to Balmoral. But you don't really see much from the Queen's there. I mean, you can park. There's a car park nearby that you can park in, and you can walk over the bridge that links Crathy, which is where the Queen goes to church, and obviously the estate. And you can walk across the bridge, and then you can stand at the gates, and sometimes you might catch a glimpse of members of the royal family going in and coming out. Normally on a Sunday, when the Queen goes to church on a Sunday, that's the day when you would catch a glimpse of them. And I remember as a youngster on many, many, many occasions kind of standing there and catching glimpses of all members of the royal family as they would drive to and from the church, going way back to the 1980s. I mean, I think I've even got pictures of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, the Queen Mother, and obviously the Queen and Prince Philip. So obviously a very different royal family back then, but it's great kind of looking back on these photos and remembering making my parents drive us so that I could to that area so I could catch a glimpse of the Queen. And that was very much because, as I've said before, I had a real love for our royal family, and it was just really exciting to be able to to catch a glimpse of them, because that was the closest I thought I would ever get to them. I even remember on one occasion we had I don't know why, but we had a meeting, and this is before I worked for the royal family. We had a meeting up at Balmoral Castle, and I remember being with my parents and my brother, and we were driving. We got permission, obviously, to drive in, and the Queen was in residence at this point, so it was quite exciting, actually having this opportunity to go to the castle when she's there. I remember this so well. I remember this very clearly, and as we were driving up, this was the occasion when the Queen was driving, she was coming down, and my father clocked the Queen as she was coming down, and I think I've actually mentioned this before, but suddenly kind of took us off the road because the Queen was coming down the drive, and I remember thinking that's real dedication, take us off the road. And I don't think my mother was too happy about the situation, but the Queen was safe. That was the main thing. And then we carried on up to the castle, and I remember going into the kind of staff area, the kind of canteen area, and I was just amazed. Even though it was a staff area, I was just amazed to be in this fabulous place. And we got to kind of a little wander around, and it was just so exciting because, again, watching documentaries as a youngster or as a child and recognising some of these buildings was for me. It was a bit. I suppose it's a bit like somebody going to Hollywood or something, and kind of seeing these kind of iconic places that you recognise in the movies. Well, suddenly here I am seeing these fabulous buildings. And to quickly mention, the actual ruins of the old Balmoral Castle, the foundations, I should say, are actually still there. And from memory, you can actually kind of make out the outline of where the old castle used to stand, and it is very close to where the new castle is now. One of the other stories I remember hearing about Balmoral Castle, and it's a bit of a sad story, is that when Queen Victoria continued to go up there after Prince Albert's death, she was a great lover of afternoon tea, and she used to have afternoon tea served to her every day at the same time. I believe it was around about 4 o'clock, between 4 and 6. But what's really sad is she would have it in this bay window, and apparently she would continue asking the table to be laid for the two of them, meaning her and Prince Albert, and then she would say, "I shall pour tea for us myself," meaning she would pour the tea for her husband and for herself. But obviously he was no longer with us, and I always thought that was quite a sad story. But I suppose for her, it was somewhere that she felt close to him. The castle also gets used for events throughout the year, especially when the Queen is obviously there. And it's quite special when they have kind of garden parties or anything up there, because with the backdrop of the castle, it's just absolutely stunning. And of course, the other big event that they have up there is the Gillies Ball, and they have 2 of those every year, or when the Queen's there. So one in August and one in September. And that's a tradition that goes back to Queen Victoria, who would have had the Gillies Ball when she used to go up to Scotland, and again, the same as it's done today. It's everything about it is the exact same. It's kind of set that it's one of those traditions that's not changed in literally in over 150 years. It's probably even it's more now, isn't it? But in 150 years, it hasn't changed, and it's a huge honour to be asked to go, because I remember watching the documentary in 1992 about the royal family, and you saw the Gillies Ball, and I remember saying to my late father, how do you go to that? How do you get invited to the Gillies Ball? And he said, it just doesn't, you can't, you've either got to be a member of the family or a member of the team, the staff. You can't, you don't just get an invite. And from memory, I don't think you can just invite random people to go either. It's quite an amazing thing to actually be asked to go. And I remember when I was asked to go, I was so excited that I say I was asked to go, but one of my colleagues said, about going, and there was an invitation kind of for the Prince's staff if they wanted to go. And I was so excited about this possible opportunity that I say opportunity because I was also slightly nervous, because if I go, do I wear a kilt? Do I dance? There's so many things that were kind of going on in my head. And I remember I decided to take some dancing lessons. I say secret dancing lessons, but what happened was the Queen's piper, she's got a piper that plays the bagpipes every morning, which I'm sure some of you know. And he was actually obviously up in Scotland with the Queen, and he very kindly came over to Bick Hall to give us, anybody in the household that wanted, dancing lessons. And I thought I didn't really kind of say to anyone other than the other members of staff that went. And I thought this is quite a good idea, because I am obviously Scottish, and I used to do Scottish dancing, but I haven't done it for years. So I thought this is a great opportunity to kind of relearn Scottish dancing. And it was great fun, absolutely great fun. And then it was probably it probably about a week before, and it was a week before the actual ball, and I remember kind of thinking, it's been a really good experience doing the dancing, but I'm a bit nervous to go because I don't really know the protocols and what to do. And my biggest fear, if I'm being completely truthful, my biggest fear was what happens if, like in that documentary that I watched as a child, what happens if I have to dance with the Queen? That was one of my biggest fears. And because, you don't want to get that wrong. So I remember kind of thinking, right, I'll leave it and just see what happens near the time. So on the evening of the Gillies Ball, I was on duty. I was doing dinner, and I remember I was serving dinner to the Prince and the Duchess, and obviously some of their guests. And the Duchess actually said to me, "Are you going to go to the ball tonight?" And I remember saying, "I don't think I will, because I don't really know what to wear." I was trying to think of a sensible excuse. And the Prince then said, "Well, don't you have your kilt?" And I thought, oh, because I probably had mentioned I brought my kilt up with me. So I said, "Well, yes, I do have a kilt." And he said, "Well, that's perfect. You can wear your kilt." So I thought, okay, I can wear my kilt. And then I said, "Well, actually, I don't know how to kind of get there." And then the Duchess said, "Well, you can travel over with us. There'll be a few cars going over, and you can come over with us." And I remember thinking, yes, I hadn't really planned this. I hadn't really thought of going in convoy with the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall to Balmoral Castle. It wasn't really in my schedule of things that I'd planned. And I remember kind of looking, not knowing what to say. And the Prince said, "Yes, fantastic idea. Why don't you come with us?" And what do you say then? So I said, that would be a huge honour, sir. And thank you. And they said, "Well, if you get changed and come back." So one of the other butlers finished off the dinner, and I quickly went off and got changed and put my kilt on and got back over to the house. And then obviously after the dinner, the royals are all kind of, the royals, the Prince and the Duchess and the friends are all starting to kind of head out to the cars, and I walked out, and I remember initially I almost went into the wrong car. I went into the car that's obviously for them. And I remember I think it was somebody said to me, turned around and said, "Oh, that's actually the the Prince and the Duchess go in that car, you'll be in one of the car behind. So I thought, of course, I'd already got delusions of grandeur, going in the Prince's car. But I went in one of the cars behind, and off we go to the castle, to Balmoral Castle. And it's probably about, I'd say about 10, 15 minutes or so, I think, to go over to the castle from there. So it's not too far, but it still is a little bit of a journey. And as we got to the castle, I had this flashback to when I was a kid again. And remembering as a kid, I would stand at those gates and wave to people as they drove in, especially if it was members of the royal family. And suddenly, I remembered on one occasion, I was there when it was Gillies Ball, as a member of the public, waving as cars were going in. And here, I want to say 15 years later or something, I'm now in one of those cars going into the Gillies Ball in the royal convoy. And as we got to the gates, the car can obviously slowed down to go in as the gates were opening. And I remember there was a few people there, and I remember suddenly kind of waving to them, and somebody next to me said, "What is it you're doing?" And I said, as I was kind of doing my little wave, and I said, "Well, the people they've come far." And they looked at me thinking, what's he on about? And what I was meaning was, we used to travel quite a few hours to get there and just hope that somebody would wave. And so in a way I was thinking, that's what I was remembering. So I gave my little wave. And anyway, we then drive up to the castle, and when we got up there, we obviously get out the vehicles, and I actually went to go, once again, delusions of grandeur, I went to go in the main front door of the castle where the royals go in, and somebody quickly pointed out that we go round the back in a side door into the ballroom. And so we go round and we go in, and the ballroom is a room that I have seen before, because when the castle is open to the public, you're allowed to visit. It's the one room you can see is the ballroom. So I kind of knew this room from being there before, but obviously very different, because normally it's got display cabinets and things, and suddenly you go in and it's this huge empty, well, I say empty, I mean it's full of people, but this beautiful, beautiful ballroom that hasn't really changed again since the day the castle was built. So it's quite it really does make you feel so, you're kind of in awe, you're kind of amazed and kind of taking everything in, the atmosphere, the guests, everyone looks so beautifully dressed. Everybody was so beautifully dressed. And the thing I forgot to mention to you, when the Duchess asked about me going, and she could tell I was nervous, and she said, if I go, we will dance. And I remember thinking, well, she'll forget, she won't remember. But then I panicked, because when I got into the ballroom, I suddenly thought, well, what happens if she does try to find me to dance and I don't know what to do? And the next thing, the national anthem kind of plays, which signals that the members of the royal family are about to come into the ballroom. And down a staircase, you've got members of the royal family that come in to the castle and walk down the staircase. Absolutely wonderful sight. And then I remember kind of thinking, I'm just going to kind of hide out the way, just so that I don't get asked to dance. But the Duchess found me. She did actually find me, and she danced with me. We had a dance, and I remember as we were dancing, she said, she could tell I was nervous, and she said, are you okay? And I said, I'm just worried about doing it, getting the footing wrong, or this kind of thing. And I said, I'm also worried what happens if I end up having to dance with the Queen. And I remember saying, I don't think that will happen, because there's 150 people there. And she says, I think you'll be okay. But famous last words, as soon as our dance had finished, she kind of stopped and didn't kind of move. And I remember just getting the feeling that there's somebody kind of behind me, because she kind of made this kind of sound. And I remember thinking, what does that mean? And so I was like, oh. So I kind of turned round, and behind me was the Queen. And the Queen just kind of looked at me and smiled. And then the music started. And I thought, help. Help. This is where I'm going to end up in this programme that I watched as a kid. And I remember saying to my father, how do you get invited? How do you get to dance with the Queen? And here it's now happening. Here I am at Balmoral Castle in the ballroom, about to dance with the Queen. And sure enough, the music started, and the Queen kind of beckoned me towards the other members of the family for this dance, and we did a reel. And in the reel was the Queen, the late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Charles, Duchess of Cornwall, myself, and I believe there was another member of staff as well. It might even been a lady in waiting, from memory. And so we did this reel, and then part of the dance, you kind of dance. I got the chance to dance with the Queen, which was amazing, but terrifying, because one thing I did notice is that she's very observant, and she's a very good dancer. She's an excellent dancer. And I knew that she would notice if I did anything wrong with my feet, so I was kind of concentrating on what I was doing with the dance, because it can be a little bit tricky. But luckily I managed to get it right. I managed not to kind of make any kind of mistakes. And it was absolutely amazing. And then as the dance kind of came to an end, the way it kind of finishes, you do this part where you kind of walk up and you walk back, and it's very hard to kind of explain to you, but anyway. And then somebody goes under and somebody goes over, and I remember I was holding the Duchess's hand, and the Queen was just in front of me, and I think the Queen was going to, the way it was going to happen, I think the Queen was going to end up kind of going under, and I remember thinking, but the Queen isn't allowed to bow to anyone, so I kind of kept the Duchess's hand up, and sorry, I made the Duchess's hand go down so that we kind of went under, if that makes sense. And I remember the Duchess kind of looking at me, and I said, "Oh, but Your Royal Highness, it's the Queen," and the Queen bows to nobody, and she kind of looked to me as if absolutely, and I remember kind of thinking to myself, have I just saved the monarchy here? It's one of those really funny moments, but it was lovely. I mean, it was really, really nice. And just to quickly mention, Duchess of Cornwall, wonderful dancer and such a kind person. The fact that she stuck to that promise, she said she would do that, and thanks to that, doing it in that dance, that then led to me actually getting to dance with the Queen as well as other members of the royal family, and the rest of the evening continued like that. I danced with other members of the family. I really enjoyed it after that point. I was relaxed then. I wasn't worried, and it was such a sight. It's absolutely amazing to kind of to be there and to witness members of the British royal family in that environment. It was great fun because, again, I hadn't been working for the family for a huge amount of time when that happened, and so it was great fun. A real dream come true. And then soon after, I remember I've got to phone my mum. Got to tell my mum what's happened. So I went out of the castle and I got my mobile phone, which was obviously a bit of an old-fashioned mobile phone by today's standards. But I gave mum a call and I said, "You're never going to believe this." I said, I've just danced with the Queen and the Duchess of Cornwall and other members of the royal family. And I remember mum kind of saying, "Oh, that's nice," but it was almost as if I think she wasn't sure if I was being serious or not. And she said, "Can I call you back in a minute? I'm just sitting at your father's supper." And I thought, yeah, that's fine. But I think part of it was a bit like, is he just being funny, And we cut up later on, and she was quite amazed at the whole story. But I think initially she thought I was just being a bit silly. But it was just amazing because, as I said, it was a dream come true for me, and that's what I think my parents were quite amazed at, is that I actually made that happen. I made it happen, which was fantastic. I think that Balmoral is quite famous for is the barbecues, because the Queen and Prince Philip loved their barbecues, as do all the rest of the members of the royal family. But Prince Philip was very much the man that did the barbecues, so no staff would be involved in that. They would very much, of course, the butlers and everybody would kind of help get things packed up and sent out, but they would very much do it themselves. It was interesting because it was a chance, I think, for the Queen and Prince Philip to kind of do it themselves. And Prince Philip was very much the king of the barbecue. You know, there's many an image out there, I think, that kind of goes around that people see from time to time with him at the barbecue, with Princess Anne beside him, a younger Princess Anne. And it's, I say younger, I mean, that sounds terrible, but what I mean is it was back in the 1960s. So, you know, obviously she was a few years younger. But can I quickly say, I think she is, without question, an amazing royal. And doesn't she still look amazing? Absolutely amazing. But anyway, so back then, a slightly younger Princess Anne, Princess Royal, with her father at the barbecue, and it's just it's such a wonderful image. But it shows you very much that they were all hands on, and the Queen would be the one that'd be kind of organising the kind of picnic and laying things up and clearing it away. And so it was just, I think what was interesting was to kind of see them in that environment and see that they very much are very capable, and they kind of like doing things for themselves. And it makes me a little bit sad that this year at Balmoral, Prince Philip's not going to be there, and it's going to be very different. I think Prince Charles recently said that, you know, I think meaning with Christmas is going to be an empty chair at the table, as there's going to be for many of us who have sadly lost people, loved ones over the last year or the last couple of years. But with Balmoral, with that being very much the kind of home of the Queen and Prince Philip, it's going to be very different. And in a way, it's a bit like history repeating itself, where when Queen Victoria lost her Prince Albert, you know, she continued to go up there and tried to kind of continue doing their traditions. And I think that is something that our Queen will, I think there will still be barbecues, but obviously I have no doubt that one of the children will take that role on, and it will continue. It's quite sad though to think that it's going to be very different without Prince Philip there. I hope you've enjoyed listening to my memories and some of the history and stories of Balmoral Castle. It really is somewhere that I'm lucky enough to have spent time at, and as I said, I know it's somewhere that our British royal family love going to. It's somewhere they can all just get away from everything. So it's quite a special place. But as I said, I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation. And for those of you that are wondering, Shumba is here, one of my royal dachshunds. He is here. He's actually been having a sleep, haven't you? Once again, as always, I've woke him up. Good reason I've got to wake him up, because it's almost time for his dinner. Yes, almost time for dinner. But I'm sure he's enjoyed listening. I think he just lies with his eyes shut and kind of taking it all in. I'm sure he does. As I said, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I will see you next week for the next In Conversation with the Royal Butler.